Jay, remember that.
I will.
It's a little tip for you that doesn't apply to the other people, I guess.
Sure. We're good.
I am going to, I don't know you guys. I mean, I know a couple of you from being readers of my books, and Jay has been around so long, everybody knows Jay. Warren Buffett, the only guy who's older than Jay, involved in investments. I don't know you guys, but I've spoken to a zillion groups like this. I've talked to a zillion people like you on the phone for the last 30-some years, 35 years. I get emails from people like you, so I'm going to address you as if I know you, even though I don't. So don't be too insulted, because what I have in mind is all the people I've talked to in the past, not necessarily you. The problem is you have a lot of incorrect thoughts about real estate investment. Some of the things you think about, you spend too much time on. Some things you spend the right amount of time, but you got the analysis wrong. Other things you're not spending any time on, and you should be. So I'm here to straighten out your incorrect thinking. Now, before you get too insulted, it might occur to you, well, actually, if he can pull that off, that's a pretty good deal, instead of me coming here and listening to some guy telling me what I already know. And I am qualified for this chore because I've been through it myself. I started in '67, investigating real estate, and then investing in '69, and I worked in the field for other people and had my own properties. So I had a bunch of incorrect notions that got straightened out over time. And so I'm not depicting you as less than me in this analysis. You're just behind chronologically. Behind chronologically. For one thing, I thought maybe Jay was getting into this with the quote that was up here. You should not be a mercenary about real estate investment. That was me when I started. I investigated, I was a cadet at West Point, and I investigated the West Point Library, which is not what they intended it for, but I did a little self-assigned project of how do you get rich young. Because I had decided, I was at West Point from '64 to '68, and then right in the middle, July '66, they sent me to the real Army for what civilians call an internship for 30 days. Every cadet did this. And I was appalled and disgusted by the real Army. It was the elite 101st Airborne Division, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And I was a committed career officer when I arrived on July 1st, and by July 10th, they said, I'm not doing this for a lifetime. And I figured at some point the clouds would open and a ray of light would shine down, and a deep voice would say, become an orthodontist. Or something. But that did not happen. It got to be the fall of my senior year, and I knew in order to be successful I had to start working on whatever it is I was going to do. And since the clouds didn't part, and I didn't get this revelation from on high, I forced the choice. I went to the West Point Library and researched how do you get rich young. And it happened, there was a Time magazine cover story around that time that focused on 8 guys. I remember one of them invented Airstream trailers. And another one was a family owned a deli in Manhattan that was really popular. These were all young millionaires. And they said at the end of the article, the way you become a millionaire young is to have your own business or invest in real estate. So after West Point, I had to be an Army officer for 5 years. And by law, Army officers are not allowed to have their own business. But you can invest in real estate. So I'm sort of forced into investing in real estate by Army regulations. But remember what was my self-assigned research project? How do you get rich young? That is the research project of a mercenary. Somebody who's interested in money. And my impression is that most people in the real estate investment, unless they were born into it, they come into it because they heard it was lucrative. This is not how you pick how you're going to spend your life. You need to, I wrote a book called Succeeding, which I don't have here. It's actually the one I sell the most copies of. That book basically says, figure out who you are in great detail, what you like, what you dislike, your strengths, your weaknesses, and then match that up to a career. And a lot of it is about structure. This is another thing, a lot of real estate investors They're not even mercenaries. They're just refugees from the man. They don't want to work in a cubicle and be bossed around, have to kiss ass and go to stupid meetings and all that. They want to be, like Greta Garbo, I want to be alone. They want to be their own man. They want to work for themselves. So, and I said in my succeeding book, I want to be a chemical engineer early in high school. And I said, you young people, you tend to divide the world up into subject matter, like the little loose leaf binders you carry around, you know, English, social studies and all that. The adult world, and then when you go to college, you have a major. You know, you meet somebody in college, what are you majoring in? Not at my school, but at most schools. And life is not about the tabs in your divider in college and high school. Life is more about adult life is more about structure. Are you self-employed? Are you working for the government? Are you working for private enterprise? And in the succeeding book, I listed a bunch of, I said, all right, I was hot on the subject of chemistry early in high school. Here's a list of chemistry occupations, which the young people reading this book are going to all look like they're the same, because it's the same subject. The older people reading this are going to immediately recognize these things are night and day different. Chemistry teacher, high school. Chemistry professor, college. Chemistry consultant, one-man shop testifying as an expert witness in court trials. Working for Exxon in the lab. Working for the Environmental Protection Agency. You know, but most of you are grown-ups, you recognize that your life would be so dramatically different in those jobs, whereas a young person would say, they're all chemistry. Chemistry, my ass. See, this one's kissing ass, this one's beating on, this one's working for the government, you know. They're very, very different. If it's a structure, you got to pick. So the same thing is true in real estate. We have different structures here. Real estate is a vast field, and the way I define it, it's even bigger. I define it as using real estate knowledge to make money. Most people define it, and I used to define it, it's one of these things I figured out, as having your name on a deed. If you have your name on a deed, you're a real estate investor. No. That's too narrow. I did an article, there's a book, David barely knew about it. He only knew about it from Jay, and that's because Jay's 77, you know. But, William Nickerson's How I Turned $1,000 into $1 million in Real Estate in My Spare Time. It's a 1959 book, and it was the first thing that told ordinary people that you can make money in real estate investment. Before, people thought of real estate investment the way you would think of oil pipelines, you know, or retrading truck tires or something. Yes, people somewhere make money at that, but I wouldn't be able to do that. Nickerson said, hey, anybody can do this. I recently wrote an article, the title of which was How I Made $20 billion in Real Estate, even though I didn't know anything about real estate, in 2 years. That was an article about John Paulson. Anybody know who John Paulson is? Hands? If you know who John Paulson is. A couple of people. Who's John Paulson?
Okay, Fed.
Huh?
Fed.
That's Hank.
No, Mr. Short.
No Hanks. Paul. John Paulson.
I'm fired.
He created the, and for Goldman Sachs.
He shorted, he's the head of John Paulson Associates. He shorted the subprime.
Oh,
And he made $20 billion. The biggest profit in the history of finance, not real estate, finance. He's not a real estate guy. It's a real estate deal he did. He was watching the news and reading the paper. And he said, this stuff sounds stupid, this subprime lending. And he took one of his assistants, and Hank Paulson and his assistant, Pellegrini, and I were all Harvard MBAs. He told, I don't know why he didn't get me to do this, but he told Pellegrini, would you check into this subprime stuff? It sounds like crap. It's going to go very, very bad. See, am I right, and how do we short it? And Pellegrini come back, you're right. And the only way you could short it was to like short Countrywide stock, which was a big lender, and short some of the other people in the lending business who were publicly traded. But that has a thing called basis risk. One of the things, Paulson did that, but he's scared to death that somebody's going to buy out Countrywide. Because if Countrywide makes lousy loans, the stock price goes down and he makes money. If Countrywide makes lousy loans, the stock price goes down and B of A takes them over, then the price pops back up and he doesn't make money, he loses money. So That's called basis risk, because what you're betting against is not exactly the same as what you think is going to happen. A countrywide corporation going down is not the same as mortgages defaulting. But anyway, Paulson made $20 billion, more than anybody else ever made in the history of the world, on any trade, as they call it. There's a book called The Greatest Trade Ever about that. And there's another book by Michael Lewis called The Big Short, where he talks about John Paulson and a number of other guys, Eisman and Dr. What's his name? They've done 60 Minutes on that. But those guys were not thinking a real estate investor is somebody who has his name on a deed. John Paulson never had his name on a deed. He never had a tenant. He never did any of that stuff that you guys do. And he made more money than all of you in the room are ever going to make in your whole life in 2 years. He's not a real estate guy. So you need to think more like him. The investment, if you think about it, is about risk and reward. The generic division of investment, if you divide investment into its most basic components, parts, what are risk and reward? Real estate investors are very big on reward. Very optimistic, very unrealistic, there's a lot of gaps in their understanding, but it's all reward. I don't know how many speakers have been in here, David, to talk about real estate risk management. I suspect, when I talked to the Bayes meetings in San Francisco, I said, I'll bet you haven't had a speaker here talking about risk, either ever or rarely. In any investment, you need to know how to manage risk, because the world is full of people who figured out how to make money, but they didn't protect themselves from losing it. The stock market, people like to say that over the 20th century, the stock market went up 12% a year, or since 1932 or whatever. And I saw a statistic in one book I read. I read a lot of books about stock market and gambling and all kinds of things other than real estate, because I read all the real estate books and I wasn't getting anything new out of the new real estate books, Dean Graziosi and that kind of crap. I'm reading his book to do a review of it. I said at the beginning of the review, you guys owe me for forcing me to read it. I switched over to stock market books and gambling books and so forth, because in many ways they are more advanced about things that we need to know than we are, and risk management is one of them. And the real estate investors know squat about risk management. And if I get into a conversation with one, it goes something like this. Well, I take calculated risks. And then I get a pen, hand it to them, a piece of paper, and say, show me the calculations. Not happening. Now, I got a Harvard MBA. I can show you the calculations. It's called decision theory, decision trees. It's probability and statistics, all kinds of stuff, bell curves and all that. If you read any of these books, like The Big Short or The Greatest Trade Ever, or some of the, I think I've read all the books on the subprime and all this mess, Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and all that. They were doing a thing called value at risk, which is a risk management approach. But it relies on the bell curve with normal distribution, which says if we take 100 people at random off the street and we measure their heights, a few will be short, a whole lot of them will be average, and a few will be tall. Okay, and that applies to naturally occurring events, random population. Okay, these people who lost their ass in subprime, all the big banks and the investment banks, they're using a thing called value at risk, which says what happened in the past, and that gave them a bell curve. And then they say, okay, that is what will happen in the future. And here's the worst case. Because it was the worst case in the past, therefore it will be the worst case in the future. And they're overlooking what's called a fat tail. And that is when you have natural events like people's height, it'll be a bell curve. When you have human will events, like people buying or selling stocks or mortgages or whatever, it's not a bell curve. The whole stock market between 1929 and 1932, the whole stock market went down. I saw an article recently where they were asking, what could you have bought in 1929 that you would have done well with? Which stock? None. And like between 32 and 35, which stocks could you have bought you would have done well with? It was like 3. One of them was a company that made matches. I saw a cartoon once in Saturday Evening Post. It had this monstrous tree stump, you know, huge, like 40 feet across, just a stump. And next to it was a toothpick factory. And it says, you know, since 1908 or something. So it was making toothpicks out of that one. But there's a match company, and then there was a couple other vices. Some alcohol beverage company and something else, where they were the only 3 stocks in the whole stock market that made money between 32 and 35. So that's a fat tail. When there is no bell curve, saying, well, some stocks did really well and some did average and some did lousy. They all went in the toilet. It's like a bunch of antelope running along. You know, you're watching from an aerial photo video from a helicopter, and all of a sudden the antelope turn and go this way. That's a human will. That's how human will works, a herd instinct. So you cannot be saying, well, the worst case before 2006 was X, therefore the worst case in the future will be X. For one thing, there's a lot of changes. You get the internet, you get program trading, all kinds of things. So plus, if everybody wants to sell at the same time, they will sell at the same time, and the hell with your bell curve. In real estate, in this book, which I wrote in 2009, the idea behind this book, Best Practices for the Intelligent Real Estate Investor, was the world had gone to hell in a handbasket since 2006. And I wondered, what would a book say back in 1996 so that if you followed what the book said, you wouldn't have gotten obliterated by the late 2000s. And that's what this book is. It's got a lot about risk management and how if you'd have done things the way the book says, you would not have been blown away by the late 2000s. And I found in risk management, in real estate investment, there are 14 risks in real estate investment. And whenever I say a number, people start writing. I'm not gonna. Well, I'll read them to you real fast, but don't make me do this again. But there's 14 discrete risks. If you don't buy any of my stuff, it's johntreed.com. I didn't bring it. I mean, I got this one, but it's for help me to speak. 14 discrete risks. Inflation, credit, that's somebody promising to pay you and not doing it, like a tenant. Litigation, toxic contamination, overbuilding, regional or national economic downturn. Political risk, which is a passage of a law that hurts you. Rent control, downzoning, Tax Reform Act of '86. Casualties, fire, flood, earthquake, that kind of stuff. Higher interest rates. If you've got fixed rate mortgage, they won't affect your payments, but when you go to sell, they'll affect the buyer's payments, which will in turn affect the value of your property. Interest rates go up, property values go down. Liquidity, that is inability to find a buyer or an acceptable mortgage fast enough. A lot of people get balloon payments and stuff, and they make the assumption, assumptions are the mother of all screw-ups, they make the assumption that they're going to be able to sell or refi before that balloon payment. The whole damn subprime deal was that, all these home buyers. I saw a person who shall remain nameless. He has a name, and you know his name, but I'm not going to reveal who it is. He was put into receivership. He's a multi-millionaire real estate guy. He was put into receivership because he couldn't make a balloon payment on time. And he was never poor. He had plenty of money, and he did not have cash. That's liquidity risk. Obsolescence. Like when I was a kid, a store was a store on Main Street, had an apartment upstairs. And a little later, a strip out in the suburbs or a mall. Also warehouses. Used to be downtown, they had great big elevators, people commuted to their jobs on a bus. Warehouses now, out in the distant suburbs, concrete floors, 20-foot ceilings, people park their car to work there. And the final thing is physical injury, which is something, a lot of people in real estate investment renovate. If you renovate, you're going to hurt yourself. One of the books I read on renovation talked about all the injuries the guy had suffered. You know, it's just the way it is. And I added one, I said it was a 15th risk, but it's sort of more of a casualty subsidiary, and that is what I call red tag risk. That is where you don't have an earthquake, but you have an earthquake inspector. And he comes along, slaps a red tag on your building. When I wrote that article, I talked about 1500 Newell Avenue in Walnut Creek. That maybe you guys don't go there. It's across the street from Kaiser Hospital. It's a 10-story building, office building. It's a Kaiser, 10-story office building. Over here is a little strip center with some restaurants, coffee shops and stuff. And over here is a JP Morgan Chase. 10-story office building is empty. I used to go there. I had a lawyer there. I had doctors there. And the building is empty because somebody put a red tag on it. Now, you would rather have an earthquake than an earthquake inspector, if you think about it. Because you have an earthquake and you have earthquake insurance, it pays. If you have an earthquake and you don't have earthquake insurance, you can frequently fix the damage. But if you have a red tag, there is no red tag insurance. And there is no, you can't call up a contractor specialized in red tags. Because the red tag means this building is uninhabitable. And what they're going to do, like research, they're going to tear it down and put a multi-use retail thing there. It's really a hotter than hell neighborhood. That's where Broadway Plaza is. People come from all over the world to see Broadway Plaza. They're about urban planners and stuff. They're building in Neiman Marcus. They got Nordstrom and Apple store. Wherever there's an Apple store, that's a hot neighborhood. Yeah, Apple is next to Tiffany, of which I can say the same thing. So that's the neighborhood this is in. But that building is worth zilch. That is worth the cost. That is worth the land value minus the demolition cost because of that red tag. So that's a risk. Now a lot of people think, well, I know what risk management is. Diversification. Bull. Those 14 risks I just listed each have their own discrete risk management technique. Fire, fire insurance. Earthquake, not earthquake insurance. Too expensive, the deductible's too high. Bunch of nonsense. Earthquake is not really an insurable risk because with life insurance, a whole lot of people pay premiums, a few people die, it works out. With earthquake insurance, a whole lot of people pay premiums, a whole lot of people file claims the same day. That's not an insurable risk. So you can't use insurance for everything. So with earthquake, how do you manage that risk? I was making a speech at the Freedom Fest last year in Las Vegas, and some guys, I was talking about inflation, deflation risk. And he said, well, you live in California, how do you manage earthquake risk? And he thought he had me. I'm from New Jersey, and when I moved out here, I read 6 books on earthquakes. You want to be on the correct soil. Generally, the high ground is the best. And I lived on Russian Hill in the city. I lived on the top of a mountain in Moraga for a while, and now I live up 600 feet up on Mount Diablo. And there's USGS maps you can get that show the quality. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've always been on a 4. So you get on that soil, you have less shaking. The worst place to be is like the marina, which is crappy fill. And it turns to jello. It's called liquefaction in an earthquake. That's why when we had the World Series earthquake, the damage was primarily in the marina and then in the flat ground in Oakland. So also the structure. If you got unreinforced masonry, you're going to be lying at the bottom of a pile of bricks in an earthquake. But if you have a structure that's like a box, like a wooden house like I have, or a steel frame, there are pictures from the Alaska earthquake where the houses like that, they were on top of the hill, now they're on the bottom of the hill, but there's still a house. You know, it's like you're riding a shoebox down the hill. Now you're going to have a little bit of expense putting the house back up there, but if it's strong sideways, because an earthquake is sort of this. Okay, the earth goes that way, and your house needs to go with it, or your building. So in order for that to happen, your building has to retain its shape when the tablecloth gets pulled out from under it, and it needs to be attached to the ground. So that's just a couple of risks, but each of those 14 risks has its own risk management techniques. You can insure it sometimes, cost effectively. You can avoid it, You can change the building structure so that you're no longer vulnerable to it. You can make your building less fire likely to be burned, less likely to have earthquake damage. You can strengthen the building. But all of those risks, inflation, interest rate, some of them can be hedged, some can be insured, some can be avoided, but there's a way to manage each of them. But you need to know what that is. When I got into this business, I said, well, let's see. I got to study law, I got to study finance, I got to study real estate law, tort law, I got to study tax law, and I made this list. And I studied all those things. I've written books about every single one of them. I did not make the 14 risks list because I had a lot of incorrect notions and a lot of holes in my thinking. But now I have that in the book. You can't just diversify. And so, well, I'm covered. The all-purpose risk managing device is diversification. The hell it is. If you own property in one town, you're not diversified. If you own a property in 2 towns, you're diversified against municipal laws like rent control, but you're not diversified against county laws like you have to have an inspection every time an apartment goes vacant. So okay, well, I'll own in 2 counties. All right, well, now you're diversified against the county laws and the municipal laws, but not against the state law, like the rotten capital gains tax or something in California. So you can say, okay, I'm getting it now. I'm going to own a building in 2 states. Well, now you're not diversified against federal law, like the Tax Reform Act of '86. So you start to see a point here. You got to think, what is the risk, and how do I mitigate it or eliminate it? Each one has its own discrete solution. There is not an all-purpose solution, and diversification certainly isn't it. Another problem with real estate investors is they'll say, well, I own an index fund in the stock market and I made 7.3%, and in my real estate I made 8.9%, therefore real estate is better. If you own properties yourself, where your name is on the deed, and you found them and you negotiated and you bought and you managed and you sold, you spent a lot of time. I think it's 4.6 hours per unit per month is what I calculated the management time is in residential. That's the paperwork and the maintenance things. 4.6 hours per unit per month. So you cannot compare your return on your stock market portfolio with your return on your real estate portfolio without first calculating how much time you spent on the real estate and subtracting that, and then doing your return on investment calculation. And real estate investors don't do that. They're very neglectful of the value of their time. I have a book called Fixers, and I said in there, you do not want to buy fixers. You want to sell fixers. And you sell them to newlyweds. What you want to buy is disasters that the newlyweds run away from. John Beck told me a story. He found this fabulous bargain in San Francisco once when he was a lawyer, CPA, real estate agent. I guess he still is, all those things. But he took this young couple. He said, I found you the deal of the year. And when the front door was open, they were hit by this overpowering urine smell. I have a book called How to Increase the Value of Real Estate, and one of the chapters is urine smell. Because after I wrote this article, I got a whole lot of other actual case histories. Urine smell is so widespread, it's a technique. And the wife of the newlywed couple said, I'm not going in there. So John said, this is the deal of the year, you gotta buy this. They wouldn't buy it. So he bought it. And I did a case history article, it's also in the book, and I told him what he paid and what he sold it for. And what you do, you had to get the bikers who lived there out of there too. That's Jay's. I reviewed one of Jay's books, and he said something about you increase the value of a property by cleaning up all the junk in the yard. And I said, I agree with that, but I think that's how to make money in Reading, not how to make money in real estate. In my neighborhood, there's not a lot of houses where you can pull that off. But Anyway, John Beck bought this house, threw the bikers out, and opened the doors and windows. He had to take out the carpet and the pad, and I think there might have been one place where he had to redo the floor because the urine smell was in the floor. But it's fixable. I used to say, never buy a property with a bad foundation. You know, Mr. Know-it-all real estate expert. And I was talking to one of my readers on the phone. He said, you know, I agree with most of the things you say. And I said, oh, well, give me an example of when you don't agree with it. He said, well, you said always avoid bad foundations. He said, that's not good advice. And I said, why not? I said, well, you know, I mean, you're stuck. He said, no, you fix it. I said, bad foundation you can fix? He said, oh, yeah. So I started researching. And I found, if you've ever been in litigation, you know, there's a guy who's the biggest expert on earth for everything. I got sued once. And my tenant said my sliding glass door was not good enough, and that's how a guy broke in and raped her. And one of the witnesses State Farm hired to testify on my behalf is the world's biggest sliding glass door expert. And this is how he makes his living. And just sitting there listening to him, I was in awe. And it was not only his facts. I mean, this guy knew from the top of his head every sliding glass door had ever been manufactured, and who made it, what year, and you know when it hit #1 and all that. And he also had an attitude. So ever since then, whenever I testify in court, I have the same attitude, and that is, he did not give a rat's rump who won the case. My side was paying him, but you couldn't tell this in his testimony. They'd ask a question that would make me look bad. He'd say, is this true? He'd say, yeah. The other side's expert, who was a moron, he kept trying every question. He's trying to twist everything to make the guys that are paying him look good, the plaintiff's attorney. And he looked like a lousy expert as a result. My guy, he couldn't care less. So if I were even the defendant, or he was an expert witness, if I were the defendant, even in a criminal trial, I would do that because that really made a great impression, that he didn't care who won. Due diligence is a big thing in real estate. I wrote an article a couple of years ago called Undue Diligence. And I said, you guys are doing too much due diligence on some things and not enough on others. For example, you typically when you buy a property, you look at properties and 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 you look at properties. You're trying to find the best one. It's like my wife's parking space proximity phobia disease, where she cannot stand the thought that the parking space she parked in was not the closest one to the door at the time she parked. So you get a lot of real estate investors, they're going around looking at apartment buildings or whatever it is they buy, and they have to find the absolute, #1 best deal in their market at that time. And I was talking to a guy once, one of my fellow Harvard MBAs, he got into real estate investment following my example. All the guys that did that have more money than me. You know what? They didn't write books. That's the key difference. But I asked him once, I was talking to him once, he said, you know, if I had bought this building that I rejected 4 years ago, I would have really made a lot of money. And then he paused and said, hell, if I'd have bought any of the buildings I looked at 4 years ago, I'd have made a lot of money. So that's the undue diligence, where you're trying to find the absolute best deal that's available right now in the market. Why? Why don't you set a standard, which we'll use the word enough to describe, and when you find it, buy it. In my succeeding book, I talk about buy the first, not the best. Same thing applies to hiring. I was standing in front of a duplex once when I was early in my investment career, and my clipboard. Anybody know my book, Checklist for Buying Rental Houses and Apartment Buildings? It used to be called Rental Property Acquisition Handbook. It's an inch thick, and it's a checklist for buying a building, which I created for my own use originally. And I'm standing in front of this building, you know, checking out the downspouts, and the guy comes out from inside. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "This building's for sale. I'm thinking about buying it." He said, "We just sold it." So, and then that happened to me a bunch of times in real estate. I was a real estate agent And one day I was cold calling to get listings, and I got one. You know, they said yes to the question, are you thinking of selling your home? I made an appointment to go see them the next morning. And we had some real estate investment agents in the room next morning in the real estate business. So I got there the next morning, they had listed with somebody else the previous night, who they didn't know when I had made the appointment. So if you snooze, you lose. And then on another occasion, I needed a new apartment manager for my building in Texas, and I live in California, Fort Worth building. Same one where I got sued. So I interviewed a number of people over the phone that responded to the ad, and then I went to Texas to interview them in person. I was going to interview the best ones. So I called the best one to schedule an in-person interview. You know how this story ends? She got hired by somebody else. Now think about it. Which deals go the fastest? The best deals. Which prospective employees get hired the quickest? The best ones. So you have to stop looking for the best and hire the first one who meets your criteria, whether it's a building or an employee or whatever. So you need to find criteria for what it is you're looking for, and when you find it, buy it. On 2 occasions, I paid full price for property I bought. One was a duplex in Haddonfield, New Jersey. The other was a 25-unit building in DeSoto, Texas, just south of Dallas. I looked at that building at night for the first time. The 25-unit apartment building, never heard of it in my life. I arrived after dark, and I had my checklist, and I damn well go through it. I look at every room of every unit, because I'm buying every room in every unit. Well, we'll show you this one, you know, it's over there, you know, the people, they're home. I want to see the one over there where the people are home. Probably has ceiling water damage or something. If I go into a place and people are in there, there's like 3 or 4 people in the bedroom and they're doing something, I go into the bedroom. But I say, oh, excuse me. No, excuse me. I'll go in there, I have a checklist for the bedroom. It reminds me to look at the ceiling, all corners. Because if you go in there, if there's something interesting in the corner, you go in the room, you go, oh, that's interesting. You walk out, you didn't see the water stain. So anyway, I did my thing on that building that night, and I did some calculations, and I said, what's the price on this again? So 25-unit building, 1983, Texas. What's the price on this again? He said $600,000. I said, sold. And it turned out it was one of my subscribers was the owner. And he said, I'm going to do an exchange. I'm a big advocate of tax-free exchanges. Kind of an obsolete thing. It's from back in the days when people had gains. Gains were big then, and tax exchanges were big. He said, I'm going to do an exchange. So we get to closing, 3 months later, and I said, so what'd you get your exchange? He said, nothing, I'm not doing an exchange. I said, why not? He said, the best deal I found is the one I gave you. So typical seller, he's a little behind the market. He had been in the market when he bought the building 5, 6, 7 years before, and he thought he'd been paying attention to the market, but he hadn't. He was behind the market. And when I heard that number, $600,000, after inspecting that building and doing the numbers, I said, sold. Now, if I had followed the rule, you always negotiate, I might not have got it. The other one I bought for $29,900 back in the 73. But again, this was a house, $29,900 in Haddonfield. Haddonfield is super high-tone, rich people thing. I could normally not even buy there. But at that particular moment, FHA went out of business because the Congress did not renew its charter. And conventional mortgages went out of business because New Jersey had a usury limit and the market went above the usury limit. So what's that leave? What's that leave? FHA's gone, conventional's gone?
VA.
VA, baby. You could not buy a house VA in that town for years. But for 2 months, you could. And I'm a vet. So, boom. $29,900 sold. Where do people, real estate investors, not do enough due diligence? I do due diligence. When I'm selling, I do due diligence on the buyer. When I'm buying, I do due diligence on the seller. I ask the buyer, say I'm selling a property, I ask the buyer, You ever buy a building like this before? Because typically I was selling apartment complexes that I own. You ever buy a building like this before? Oh yeah. From whom? Well, what do you mean? I want the name of the guy. And after that, I want his phone number and address. What do you need that for? I'm going to call him up and ask if you're some asshole that pulls tricks at the 11th hour. Oh, okay. And if they don't give it to me, then I say good luck in your quest. And the same for when I buy, I do the same thing with the seller. And I had a number of people after closing, they told me, you know, you're pretty smart doing that. After you told me why you were doing that, I remember 2 or 3 instances over my career where some guy tried to pull some crap at the 11th hour. It cost me a lot of money. So there's nice guys out there, there's bad guys out there. And when you're selling a property, you take a property off the market that you're trying to sell for $500,000, $2 million or something. You take it off the market because some guy says he's going to buy it, and then you find out he's the guy who prides himself on pulling these 11th hour tricks. You know, a lot of my uncles got to inspect it, you know, the day before closing and all that. You got to check those guys out. Title and escrow companies. I have done a couple of case histories about somebody that, you know, they spent months finding the world's greatest building, and they negotiated the world's greatest deal. And the realtor said, oh, we use ABC escrows. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And ABC escrow, ABC stood for abscond. It literally took the money, the sale proceeds of the previous property that went into the escrow, they stole it. And they went to Brazil or somewhere. Actual case histories. I got them from lawyers. Scary, scary stuff. So you got to check out, you got to do due diligence on every link in the chain. Not just checking out the house 16 times over to make sure it's the best deal. You got to check out who you're dealing with, who your counterparty is when you're buying and selling. You got to check out who's going to hold the money, even if they only have it for 2 seconds. If they got it for 2 seconds, that's long enough for them to wire it into their account instead of yours. Counterparties is the other one. When I wrote this hyperinflation book last year, How to Protect Your Life Savings from Hyperinflation and Depression, there's a whole lot of neat sounding financial engineering you can do. You can hedge your risk of inflation, you can hedge your risk of deflation, you can do all kinds of cute things. But it was all going through exchanges. The Chicago Mercantile, the New York Stock Exchange, and all this. And I studied, to write this book, I studied 2,000 years of financial history. A whole lot of books I read. And all of those exchanges at times have misbehaved. They will stop selling a particular thing. You might decide you're going to use Ginnie Mae futures to hedge. And they initiated Ginnie Mae futures with big value in a certain year. And then there comes a year when they decide, we're not going to do this anymore. Not profitable enough. Pork bellies, I just read a couple months ago, are disappearing. You know, I mean, that's my favorite commodity because it's a funny name, you know, pork bellies. But nobody's buying them anymore. The number of sales per day has gone down so low they're thinking of discontinuing them. Well, if that's your hedge, you go, hey, you can't discontinue my hedge. So the stock and commodities markets where you can do a lot of interesting hedging, they go out of business. They stop doing the particular security that you're using. They may change the rules. I don't know if any of you know about the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market in silver in the 70s. And the people on the exchange where silver is traded, they took a position opposite. They shorted this Hunt brothers. The Hunt brothers were long in silver, which means they wanted the price to go up, and it did. They were buying it themselves and driving the price up in the process. The guys who were on the board that set the rules for the commodity exchange where silver is traded changed the rules to essentially block the Hunt brothers from making any money. And these guys sat down on the other side and made a killing. That seems pretty awful to me, but you know, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me about counterparties, I would have said, well, you need to go with the top of the top. Fidelity Title, Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns, 125 years, very conservative. Who am I going to name now? Even countries. You know, I want to put money in 10 different countries. Which one should I do? Well, obviously the G10. The G10, the United States, Japan, which has a 242% debt to GDP ratio, the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Greece. Britain is now in a austerity program. France is hurting because they loan money to the pigs. Germany's hurting a little bit because they loan money to the pigs. Where are you supposed to go? I don't know the name of a counterparty, either a stock exchange or an investment banking firm or a bank or a country that I could recommend. So a lot of this stuff with hedging and risk management, you on paper, you can do it through all these different exchanges. But I read the books about long-term capital management. I don't know if you know about that company. They were a bunch of college geniuses, Nobel Prize winners and stuff, and they lost their butt. Damn near brought down the whole financial system because it didn't occur to them that Russia would default. And then also, we don't have it in real estate, but in the securities markets, sometimes other investors see a weakness in you, and they can go against you and create a self-fulfilling prophecy where you lose your butt, not because you bet wrong, but because they saw you were a little weak, and they all piled on the other side of the trade, which meant you had margin calls, which are like balloon payments, and they bury you in margin calls that you can't make. Management. Most of you who own property, if I asked you to do a pie chart of how you spent your time, let's take a property that you bought, owned, and sold. I ask you to do a pie chart on how you spent your time during the life of that investment. The largest slice, by far, is going to be management. Folks, there is no money in management. Now, if you do a lousy job of management, you're going to make less money than if you do a good job. But there is not enough money. The difference is low pay per hour. But most of you spend most of your time in management. And you buy a property for 300 grand, and you sell it 8 years later for 700 grand, and you say, boy, am I smart. I bought the property, I made all this money. And I'm going to say to you, well, you bought it. That's one thing you did. You owned it and managed it. That's another thing you did. And you sold it. Where in those three did you make the money? You probably made the money by having a call option on the property. A call option means the right to buy something for a certain fixed price over a certain period of time. Now, if you're the fee simple owner, one of the things you have in your bundle of rights is a call option. So if it goes up in value, you get the benefit because a call option is a subsidiary right to fee ownership. But that was the only right that made you any damn money. So you were a fee owner, which means you had to manage it and you had to go find it, all sorts of stuff. If you had just had a call option on it, you would have made the same money and you'd been sitting home. You would have been doing 4.6 hours a month screwing around with it. So you are spending most of your time on property management, which is poorly compensated. It may be uncompensated. Now some people say, well, I'll hire it out. God, don't do that. I guess we may have some property managers in the room. Too bad. Do not hire an outside 5% of the gross property manager ever. Either hire somebody who's salaried for you or do it yourself. And the problem is the negligence and kickbacks. But I wrote a big thick book, How to Manage Residential Property for Maximum Cash Flow and Resale Value. Read it. And then if you have a property manager, compare what the book says to do with what he's doing. Especially on, a lot of property managers are very proud they have a waiting list for their clients' buildings. You know, if somehow I was ever forced to have a property manager, you had a waiting list on my building, I would sue your ass. Because you got the rents too low. Making your job easy, hurting my income and my property value multiplied by 10. So you want the vacancy rate to be 5%. Because everybody's going to assume it. The lenders, when they appraise it, the appraisers, and the buyers are all going to assume 5%. Well, if you don't have that 5%, in order to get ripped to not having 5%, you get your rents too low, so that's costing you money. Then they're going to add the 5% in anyway, and ding you another amount that you don't deserve. There's three things in all business activity: good luck, bad luck, and skill. The hedge fund managers have figured out how to chop that stuff up. And I added a little modification to improve it. The hedge fund managers get 1 or 2% of the asset value per year. no matter what happens. You see the risk management there? They're getting that 1 or 2%. I don't care what happens, they're getting it. They also typically get 20% of what they call the upside. I would call it the market upside. So if they put you into a stock or a bunch of stocks, and those stocks go up 30% over the time in question, they get 20% of the 30%. That's 6%. So what caused those stocks to go up? Good luck. Okay? So, and then skill, this is my addition. Let's say we're not dealing with the stock market, we're dealing with real estate investment. We're going to buy a building. You're going to put up the money. You're going to pay me 1% a year to take care of the whole thing. I'm going to find the building, and I'm going to do add value strategy. I'm going to find a building that needs some kind of, the disaster that I turn into a fixer and sell the newlyweds. I don't want to turn it into a nice building because the newlyweds will undervalue the cost of turning a fixer into a nice building. So I am not going to do for 30 grand what they're only going to knock 5% off, 5,000 off the sale price when they buy it. So you buy a disaster, you turn it into a fixer, and then sell it to newlyweds. So let's say you're going to put up the money, and I want to get, like a hedge fund, I'm going to get 1% of the asset value for managing it, and I'm going to get 20% of the market upside. So we're going to set a benchmark for what the current market is, which we can do maybe with a Case-Shiller home price index or with some kind of real estate index. And say, all right, here's what all the real estate in this area is worth now. And to the extent that that stuff all goes up, I get 20% of it. Now, I'm also going to change this from a disaster to a fixer. I want 80% of that. Because that's my skill. I'm making that happen. So, if the whole market goes up 25%, I get 20% of that. That's market good luck. And you agreed to that, so I get 20% of that. If our building, where I do the change it from a disaster to a fixer, goes up not 25%, but 38%, that extra 13% caused by me. That's my skill, above and beyond the market. I get 80% of that. I don't even know why I'm giving you 20. What the hell did you do? So, but look at what I've done there with the bad luck, the good luck, and the skill. As far as bad luck is concerned, if that building does not go up in value, the market doesn't rise, I don't get any 20%, but I don't lose anything, did I? The fee owner loses, but I got, what I have is a call option on 20% of the market appreciation. And then with regard to the skill, if the whole market goes down, this building that I'm working on will not go down as much because I'm changing it from a disaster to a fixer. So I am still going to get my 80%. Now it's going to come off of, it's sort of like Obama talking about the economy, it's going to come off of what didn't happen. If I hadn't done what I did, it would have gone down further. But I can prove it because the whole market did what it did. And this building, because I changed it from a disaster to a fixer, will be worth more than it would have been if we didn't do anything. Any kind of active thing that you do. I'm an advocate of two active strategies, which is, if you know anything about private equity, this is what private equity is about. Hedge funds are one thing, private equity is another. Mitt Romney made $500 million as a private equity manager of Bain. Private equity is where you buy a company and you either buy it for a bargain price and or you add value. You manage it better. So that's called an active strategy. A passive strategy is where you just buy the S&P 500 index and hope it goes up. For real estate, I think you should act like private equity guys. You either make a bargain purchase where you get it real cheap on day one because it's a foreclosure or it's a sheriff's sale or it's got urine smell or whatever. You either get a bargain purchase or you can add value because there's some unrealized potential. Like maybe it's an oversized lot and you can sell off, you can buy it for the price of a house without an oversized lot and then you sell off the extra lot and it's still worth what you paid for it. That would be an example of adding value. I have a book called How to Increase the Value of Real Estate. It has a whole lot of tangible and intangible ways to improve the value of real estate. Another intangible way would be if you could get the zoning better. If it's 1 house per acre, you can change it to 2 houses per acre. That roughly doubles the value. So that's adding value. Bargain purchase, I have a book called How to Buy Real Estate for at least 20% below market value, 2-volume book, and that's all foreclosures and partial interest. If you buy a tenant, common interest, you get those real cheap. And all kind of crazy stuff most people never thought of. So, good luck, bad luck, skill. You want to put yourself in a position to benefit from good luck, which I did with that 20% of the upside thing. That's 20% of the market upside, not what I do, but just the whole market. I put myself in a position to profit from good luck. I put myself in a position to profit from my skill with the changing it from a disaster to a fixer. And I put myself in a position to not be hurt by bad luck by getting 1% of the asset value and having no percent of the downside. I get 20% if it goes up in value, but I don't lose anything if it goes down. The fee owner loses, but not me. So that's a sort of a textbook example. That's what the hedge fund guys did. They didn't do the 80% of the skill because they were passive. Like John Paulson, when he made the $20 billion, he did not improve the mortgages. That can be done, by the way. A lot of people say, what?
I'm kind of lost. I kind of lost back here. You're referring to a fee owner. Is that something you sold to and carried the paper back to?
A fee owner?
Yeah.
A fee simple owner is a guy who buys a property and his name's on the deed.
Did you make a loan to him? Did he go to the bank to acquire the property?
No. Oh yeah, he gets a regular mortgage. If it's got a mortgage. Fee simple is the normal way you own property. You buy it, you get a deed with your name on it, you have the right to rent it, sell it, modify it, tear it down, all that stuff. That's a fee simple owner. Most real estate investors are always fee simple, which is a bad idea, and they're always long, which means their position is such that they hope the value goes up. They never short. John Paulson made more money than anybody in the history of the world being short, and most real estate investors, they would never be short. They don't understand short. How would I do short? So I want you to think long and short. I want you to think fee simple, call option. I have what I call, there's a chapter in this book called Deedless Real Estate Investing. That's sort of what Paulson did. There's a whole lot of ways to make money in real estate without having your name on a deed. With deedless real estate investing, by the way, is also litigationless real estate investing. They sue the guy whose name's on the deed. Not the guy who gets 1% of the work. Well, it might sue you for being a property manager if it's related to property management. A lot of people say about somebody who made a lot of money in real estate, and I've known guys that made a lot of money in real estate, they didn't know nothing about real estate. They just put a bunch of chips on red, and it happened to be a red year. And there's a saying on Wall Street, in a bull market, everybody thinks he's a genius. So you got a lot of total morons running around driving Ferraris, and they think they know something. Some of them do, but a lot of them, they were just the right place at the right time. And they say, people would say, if I criticize a guy like that, well, you can't argue with results. Well, I can argue with all kinds of things. The way you judge a decision is based on what the decision maker knew at the time. If I tell you I'm going to become a millionaire, and my method is to buy lottery tickets, state lottery tickets, and I buy 3 of them, and one of them hits $1 million, have I proved? Can't argue with the results. I wanted to be a millionaire, I developed a plan, and I am a millionaire. Did I prove that buying lottery tickets is a best practice for making $1 million? The reason is, what I knew at the time I bought the lottery ticket was that a lottery ticket has a negative expected value. That's the little Harvard MBA stuff. Expected value is where you take all the outcomes, the dollar value of all the outcomes, and the probability of each of those outcomes, and you multiply them together. It's a weighted average. And that gives you a number. So, and then the other number you look at is the cost of the lottery ticket. In all cases, if you take the cost of the lottery ticket and subtract the expected value of the bet, it's negative. In other words, the expected value, if it's a $4 lottery ticket, the expected value will be $2 or something. Because the difference is how the government makes their profit. That's why they run the lottery, or the casinos in Las Vegas. So if you're buying something with a negative expected value, you're an idiot. And somebody who says you're going to become a millionaire by buying lottery tickets and then does so, you can argue with that result. What he knew at the time, he didn't know the lottery ticket was going to win. What he knew is it has a negative expected value, and he bought it anyway. So you don't judge decisions by results. You can argue with results. You should argue with results. You want to judge anybody's decision, you judge it on what he knew at the time. I'm an expert in 6 fields. Football coaching, baseball coaching, real estate investments, succeeding, self-publishing. This thing is really generically some monetary instability. And what's my other one? Football, baseball, 6 of them. Football, baseball, real estate, this monetary stability thing, succeeding, self-publishing. That's it. I'm an expert in all 6 of those fields. When I was younger, if somebody told me he was an expert in 6 fields, I'd say that's bull. You can only be an expert in 1, maybe 2 fields. Well, that's bull. I have done it. I'm surprised that it happened, but it does. And if you go on the internet on any of those fields, I'm far more prominent in some than others. But if you start shooting the bull, you know, who's written a good book about this, you will get my name in all 6. Maybe take you a little while on a new book, or on succeeding, which is sort of a generic kind of subject. But you go on the internet and ask about good baseball coaching book, or good football coaching book, or a good clock management book for football, or a good real estate investment book, you can get my name pretty quick. And if somebody, even on the ones where you're not going to get my name on the internet, if somebody wants to put me in a courtroom and cross-examine me on this stuff, they're not going to get anywhere. What happens in becoming an expert, in the course of becoming an expert on 6 fields, I have become an expert on becoming an expert. Really. And since I write how-to books, a lot of experts don't write how-to books, they just do their thing. Since I write how-to books, and I was a coach of 35 athletic teams, I have also imparted the expertise. So I'm an expert on acquiring expertise, and I'm also an expert on imparting expertise. And when you become an expert, and you guys have done this in real estate investment, or you're in the process, initially, it seems like there's a million things you have to memorize. You know, you've got recourse mortgages, non-recourse mortgages, short-term leases, sandwich leases, on and on and on. Just the terminology, you get your head spinning. And then there comes a point, if you stick with it, you keep studying it, where all of a sudden a light bulb goes on and you see, oh, there's just 6 principles and all this stuff, these discrete things that I had to memorize each and every one, they're all just like a cook making a recipe out of the same 6 ingredients. For example, in real estate finance, there are 6 things to all real estate finance transactions. You've got the 3 C's. I'm winging this now without having prepared. I'm going to not come up with the 6. You got the 3 C's: character, collateral, and credit. Character is character, collateral. What's the other one? Where's the bank?
Credit, collateral, and capacity to repay.
Capacity. Credit, collateral, and capacity. Credit is your history. Collateral is what you're pledging for security, like the house in a real estate deal. Capacity is your income. In real estate, it would be your income from whatever you do for a living, plus your income from the building. Plus, you have the payment structure and how the lender gets at the asset in the event you don't pay. Now that's 5 things, maybe it is 5, but anyway, all real estate finance techniques. You know, you read a book like Robert Allen, he's got like 101 finance techniques. They are all just little variations on what I just said. You can vary the character, you can vary the capacity, you can vary the collateral, you can vary the way in which the person sees the collateral, and you can vary the payment pattern. What you want to do, I've written like 4 or 5 books on real estate finance. It's the most popular topic when you do questionnaires like I have with my readers. So I've written 4 or 5 books on real estate finance. What you want to do with a payment pattern is match the pattern of your income to the pattern of the loan. Most loans are just a fixed, $2,800 a month for 360 months. That's a common payment pattern. But you may have a different pattern of the money coming in with which to pay it. You may be 23 years old, and when you hit 25, you get an inheritance that vests or something. So you want to match the payment pattern to the pattern of your income. And like in a typical apartment building mortgage, the payment pattern of the loan is just flat. But the rent, the net income, it kind of gradually goes up, 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 up. Well, it would be nice if you could get a payment pattern that matched that gradually going up, up, up. You could borrow a little more on a particular property. With effort, you can in some cases, especially seller financing. After you figure out the 5 or 6 principles, and I've done this in the football coaching, a lot of you are football fans, what's the basic principle of offense?
Score.
Huh?
Score.
No, that's the goal. The basic principle of offense is strength against weakness. You constantly study the film of the opposing team. You try to find out where the formation they use is weak, what personnel they have are weak, where they might be weak because of what happened in previous play, somebody gets injured, and you go your strength against their weakness. Like in my book, I say most teams assume the offense is right-handed. So if they have a weak guy, they tend to put him on the offense's left. So they might have, they get 5 linemen, one of them sucks, the others are pretty good. They put the one that sucks on my left because they figure most offenses are right-handed, they tend to go this way. So my offenses are left-handed. One year when I coached Monte Vista High School, freshman, I had the tight end always on the left side. And we ran a formation called twins left the whole season. So the other team has their weak guys over here. Plus, they're not used to it. Their minds are not used to dealing with a left-handed offense. So that it just discombobulates them in ways they don't even perceive. What's the basic principle of defense? You got a hint from the basic principle of offense. Basic principle of offense, strength against weakness. This also applies to business, by the way. What's the basic principle of defense in football? Strength against strength. So what are they good at? And then like in youth football, the best teams are typically good at a play called toss sweep. They take the ball, turn around and toss it to the fastest guy on the field. He runs around the end and goes 60 yards. Not against my teams, he doesn't. Because we're geared up just to stop that play, and it always goes to the wide side of the field. If we're on the right hash, it's going this way. If we're on the left hash, it's going this way. So I have a wide side of the field defensive end whose sole function in life is to come running in here and be right there when that guy catches that ball. And that works. So anyway, that's a principle that I didn't, I'm studying football books year after year. We've been all about the wing T and the T formation and the single wing and and then all of a sudden, strength against weakness, strength against strength. So after that happens to you, the next stage in your development as an expert is you discover the things that you don't know. The things that you don't know, at the beginning, everything was something you didn't know. I'm talking now about things that you don't know and nobody knows. The things that you don't know. A true expert knows what he doesn't know. That category breaks down into 2 things. One is stuff that you're never going to know. Interest rates are totally unpredictable. They always were, they always will be. Home appreciation rates are unpredictable. Always were, always will be. One of the problems I have with Bruce Norris is that I don't know about lately, but for a while, he was doing all these numbers and predicting what's going to happen to real estate values. I don't think it can be done. And if in order to predict real estate values, you have to predict interest rates, because interest rates are extremely important in determining the value of a home or apartment building or whatever. If you can predict interest rates, forget real estate. What do you need to bother about real estate with? Just go place bets in the stock market on interest rate futures contracts. If you know that they're going, if you know where they're going, you should either long them or short them. And you borrow everything you can. You borrow to the hilt against your house, your car, everything. You place all that money on red or black, whichever you think, and you'll be a billionaire in 6 months. No need to screw around with stopped up toilets. So I don't think anybody can predict interest rates. If you can't predict interest rates, you can't predict home values, okay? Chain is as strong as its weakest link. There's an interest rate link in that chain. If you don't have that, you got nothing. If you don't have any of them, you got nothing. So there's some things that are unknown and unknowable. Future interest rate movement, stock market movement, future house price movement. There are other things that are unknown now, but they are knowable. And if you will just do your own research, you will figure it out. When I was a cadet at West Point, there were no women there. And we wanted to have women. Well, one, for me. But so we figured out, and West Point, I don't know if you know where it is, it's 50 miles north of New York City. But when you get about 15, 20 miles out of New York City, it's nothing but trees. So it's not like the suburbs or something. It's isolated. It's in the area where Washington Irving wrote the stories like the Headless Horseman and stuff. Thick, deep mountains, forest, nothing, no women. There's a little town called Highland Falls next to it. I was never in Highland Falls as a cadet. When they let me out, I wasn't going to stop there. So we figured out that you could write letters to girls whose pictures were in the newspaper. At that time, it was typically beauty queens and new stewardesses. And invite them to West Point, and they would come for the weekend. And we did that. And we started with beauty queens. I figured, what the hell, we're going to make fools of ourselves. And we never got past them because there's so many of them. And the newspapers all over the lower New York area, there are all these pageants. And also sometimes they would print a bunch of girls' pictures for some other reason, and if we would write down the names of the attractive ones, you call them on the phone, and come to West Point for the weekend, and they would come. That was pretty neat. And we graduated, we figured, well, glad we're done with that nonsense. Now we're out in the real world. Well, the real world turned out to be U.S. Army Ranger School, where me and my Ranger buddy sleeping in a foxhole out in the mountains of Georgia. There were no women there either. Then I went to Fort Gordon, which is in Augusta, which may sound like a big deal because of a golf tournament, but that golf tournament lasted about 4 days, and the rest of the year is like 30,000 GIs, 3 women that I would want to date, and they were told stay away from the soldiers. And I don't even know who their names are. We tried the beauty queen thing, but it didn't work. And every 2 months we're moving somewhere. So we finally got to Fort Monmouth, which is northern New Jersey, and we dated a bunch of the girls we met when we were at West Point. Plus the beauty queen thing worked there. And then I'm in Vietnam. Not a lot of chicks. So we developed a thing we called the system, where we tried all kinds of things. We found we had to identify a girl from a yearbook, college yearbooks or newspaper photos. We get her name, the hometown, typically where her parents lived, and then we would send her a letter because we had to explain why normal people would do such a thing. We told the story like I just told you. And we had photographically on the back of the letter my driver's license, my photograph, and my alumni card. So we're proving all the things people lied about in computer dating back then. Age, height, weight, college education, looks, whatever else was on those things. When it said for glasses on my New Jersey driver's license, it said 4. Or eyes, it said eyes 4. And half the damn dates was there. What's this about you having 4 eyes? My girlfriend and I were laughing at that. I said, the 4 means you have to wear glasses. Cut me a little slack. That worked like a freaking charm. I met my wife that way. We've been married 36 years. We got 3 sons. These were all high quality women. But that's an example of where what we did was unknowable when we started. But we did our own little R&D. When you were sitting in Vietnam, looking into the jungle at night over the barbed wire, and you're thinking, I didn't have a very good dating life in college because I went to that stupid all-male school. And then I was in Ranger School, and then I was moved around all these dinky, rural southern places where if you're not meeting them at the Baptist church, you're not meeting them at all. And by God, if I survive Vietnam, I am going to I'm getting that system out again that we created. And we figured it out. We had it down to a science. It's in my succeeding book, the actual letters. The longest chapter in that book is called Spouse Choice. But that's an example of where what we needed to know was unknowable. How do you meet women? And we said in this letter of explanation, we're not going to hang around bars and hope that the woman on the next seat on an airplane, that's a bunch of silly nonsense. But we did not, no one knew what we needed to know. So we figured it out. You can do that in real estate investment as well. And I did it a number of times in real estate investment. I had a speed strategy for a while. Speed strategy means I want to be the first guy on every property. And I would go to the newspaper printing plant and buy the paper when it came off the press. It was still damp, okay? And I'm looking at the classified ads. We had multiple listing service books back then. It was an inch-thick book. And I called the printing plant, and I had a subscription, so they would go to each real estate office and they would have your name written on your book. And I said, I want to get my book. They were in Pennsylvania, and I was in New Jersey, across the Delaware River. They printed it in Pennsylvania. I called them up and said, when you come across the river, where do you go first? And they said, Willingboro, which used to be Levittown, but there's too many Levittowns, so it changed name. But that was way up north from me. But I would go up there. It was a realtor's office and a strip shopping center. And I would sit in my car in a parking lot, reading real estate investment books. And I watch that truck pull up, and I go over to the driver, and after a couple weeks, hey Jack, how you doing? Here's your book. I go back to my car, boom, and I go to pay telephone there. It was before cell phones. It was talking 1973 or something, 75. And one day I found a 12-unit apartment building. And I was looking for an apartment building where the rents were $125 a month on a one-bedroom, $135 on a two. Because the normal rents were up around $195, and I needed that much slack to pay for my fix-up and my profit. So I needed, it had to be a certain size because I couldn't buy huge buildings. So there, in the MLS book, we normally don't find stuff, a 12-unit apartment building with $125 rents on every single apartment. Boom. You know, I'd call from the payphone, make the appointment, go over, look at it, bada bing, bada boom. I negotiated a little with him, but I signed it up. Everybody who called, when they got the book, and the realtors called their customers, too late, baby. That sucker's already signed up. So, I got that for 102, and I sold it for 132, which may not sound like much today. It sounds like two different down payments today. But it was a big deal. I was a student at Harvard Business School when I did that. But that was the speed strategy. I also sent a letter to every realtor, every licensed, not the brokers, the licensed agents, saying, I am looking for this property with the specs, this price range, this size. I got this much cash to put down, which was like 25%. I'm a realtor, I have a license, but I'm not taking a penny of this commission. I want you to call me first, because I will buy quicker. I knew realtors they want a fast sale, because their pay is whatever it is divided by the number of hours they work on it. So I told them, you're going to work less hours on this, selling this to me, than you work with anybody, because I'm the real deal. I already got this many properties. So if you see something that meets these criteria, you call me, and I will protect your commission. You get the whole commission. I'm not taking a penny, even though I'm a licensed agent. I'll disclose it as required by law. And then I sent postcards to every owner of a building. I went to the assessor's office, and I made my own file. Nowadays, you can probably buy this, but back then you couldn't. Matter of fact, when I left my last real estate job, my boss bought that 4x8 card file from me, because it was a list of all the small apartment owners in 2 counties. And I sent every one of them a letter. I said, I'm interested in a building like yours. If you ever want to sell, call me. Now, are most of them ready now to sell? No. So I said, if you're not ready now, put this card where you keep your deed. It's safe deposit fund. So you'll be able to find me. So that was my speed strategy. Now, I invented all that. I didn't get that from anybody. And some of it didn't work. But that's what I'm saying about unknowns that are knowable. You do the research. If you think about it, most successful businessmen, that's sort of their shtick, whether it's real estate or whatever. They figured out something that nobody else figured out. And they have like a monopoly as a result. you know, our system with the girls wouldn't have worked if a lot of other people were doing it, but nobody was doing it. I met one new, attractive college graduate girl per week. Every week I met one for lunch. We found out lunch was the ideal first date. There's now an organization called It's Just Lunch for people meeting hikers. My roommate, who was my ranger buddy, my best man, my roommate at West Point, my roommate when we were in the Army. I just talked to him the other day. He's a magician now. He's in Las Vegas for a magician's convention. But anyway, he wanted to meet 2 a week. So he would meet one on Saturday for lunch and one on Sunday for lunch. And then we had dates Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night from the girls we met a little while ago. Anyway, I'm not bragging about that like I'm the Fonz. I am more Richie Cunningham. But I had the Fonz's schedule because we were, the word the girls used that we met was, it was ingenious. If you can't control something or forecast it, don't mess with it. That's risk management. If you can't control it or forecast it, don't mess with it. That you know, if you can control something, that's skill. If you can forecast it, that's skill. Some things can be forecast. Right now, there's this huge pig of foreclosures going through the Python. Okay, I can forecast that. That's going to take a year or two to get through. It varies by market, but. So some things can be forecast. We could forecast with that dating system, 1 out of 6 girls would say yes to the date. 2 would be married, 2 would be moved. We would send out 6 letters to get 1 date every week. 2 would be married, 2 would be moved away. 1 would say yes, 1 would say no. That's forecasting, okay? It's not controlling, that's forecasting. But if you can forecast things, even people say, well, if you can forecast things 51% of the time, you can make a lot of money. No, no, no. 0.5% of the time you can make a lot of money if the numbers balance out. If when you win, you get a big hit, you only have to win, and when you lose, you have a small loss. You could have a structure where you only have to win 0.5% of the time. You could lose 99.5% and just win 0.5% as long as the payoff on the win is big enough to offset the losses on the losses. That goes back to the expected value, the weighted average. So if you can forecast it even a little bit, you can make a lot of money. So, but if you can't control it or forecast it, don't mess with it. You got to risk manage. You either avoid it, or you insure against it, or you hedge, or whatever. Another thing I have in my notes, which just came to me, that I find myself saying a lot is, low probability is not a risk management technique. Time and time and time again, I hear people, including top people on TV, as well, you know, we're going to get killed if this happens, but it's not likely to happen. That ain't risk management, folks. You know what that is? That is actuarial science. You have home fire insurance, not because your house is probably going to burn down, but because it might. And you do not say, well, the probability of my house burning down is low, so I'm not going to insure it. You don't say that. Very smart. Very rare instance of normal people thinking right on risk management. If somebody else has done it for you to a large extent. The probability of your house burning down is not your business. It is the business of the actuary who works for the fire insurance company when he sets the premium. Low probability, medium probability, whatever probability is an actuarial thing. It has nothing to do with risk management. It has to do with premium setting. So you should never say, my risk management for this particular risk is the probability is low. That is what long-term capital management did. This company that lost their ass in 1999 and damn near brought the financial system down with them. They said the probability of X happening is extremely low. I think they said it was 27 standard deviations or something. That means it happens once every 20 trillion years or something. Well, guess what? It happened. Okay, so their risk management technique for that was to rely on the low probability, meaning it would not happen. They could have fairly easily hedged that or avoided it. They didn't have to structure it, so they were counting on that low probability protecting it. So low probability is not a risk management technique. Transaction costs. When you guys are bragging at cocktail parties about how well you're doing real estate investment, you are not taking into account transaction costs. Transaction costs in real estate are brutal. They are criminal. They are scandalous. You can buy through Ameritrade, you can buy a stock, sometimes large quantities, where the transaction cost is quite low. I bought $276,000 worth of TIPS bonds a little while ago. By the way, I got rid of them when I read this book. when I wrote this book, I was researching. TIPS bonds stands for Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. So I bought them because I was concerned about inflation. When I write the book, I had a chapter about bonds and wrote extensively about TIPS bonds. And I said, I better read the fine print on the TIPS bonds. So I read the fine print on the TIPS bonds. And then I cursed the blue streak and sold them all. But when I bought them, they sell them 2 times a year, federal government, at auction, in April and in November. When I bought them on the auction day from the auction. The alternative is just go out and buy them in the market from somebody who already owns them and wants to sell them. I bought them on the auction day at the auction. Now, because it was in my SEP, I had to let USAA buy them and pay them a little fee, like $40 or something. If I had not had it in my SEP, I could have bought it myself, and the commission would have been 0, because I'm buying it direct from the seller, the United States government. So that was $276,000, which I could have had a 0 transaction cost on, literally 0. In real estate investment, you buy a $276,000 house, you've got tens of thousands of dollars probably in transaction costs. Now, I have a chapter on transaction costs in this book about how to cut them down. If any of you are familiar with John Bogle at Vanguard, his big invention was low-cost index funds. And his company charges a fee of somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.2% to run the index fund. And USAA is actually, the guys that I was with, I got rid of all the index funds too, also, researching the book. But they were charging 1.19%. But Bogle says, and I've read a bunch of his book, John Bogle, transaction costs are killing you guys and you're allowed. He's talking to stock market investors. They're paying like 0.6% and they're getting killed. Their return is getting killed by these goofy active money market mutual fund guys who say, I know how to pick stocks. Nobody knows how to pick stocks. I mean, a couple of guys who don't do anything else in their life, 24/7, they're studying, left-handed light bulb companies. They may know how to pick stocks, but generally, but people are paying 0.6, 0.8, 1.2, tremendous percent, which is killing their return in the stock market. You guys are up, you're not paying point anything. You're up in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15% transaction cost. Knock it off. One of the main problems is lenders requiring, a lot of the transaction costs are required by lenders. Well, don't have a lender. One way to reduce the transaction cost, and it probably makes a lot of sense these days because mortgages are a little harder to find, don't have a lender. You pay all cash, and then maybe later you get, or have a lender who's a seller. And maybe you pay all cash and then later you refinance. So you're going to have some transaction costs there, but you got a little more room to wiggle. You got more time to deal with it. But consciously think about your transaction costs. When you count your return on investment, do not leave them out. Who are you kidding? You ever run into me at a cocktail party and start talking about that stuff? I said, what's your buying transaction cost or your selling transaction cost? And then people start, well, no, not well. It's a big number. And it affects your return. But number one, acknowledge it and stop pretending it's not there. It's damn well there. And number two, knock it down. True cash flow. It's another cocktail party bragging. Oh, I got positive cash flow. Man, unless you got like a 50% loan to value ratio, positive cash flow is extremely hard to come by. And a lot of the real estate gurus, these criminal gurus, they suggest that if you take my seminar, I'm going to tell you to have positive cash flow. I'll tell you to have positive cash flow right now for free. 50% equity, and there is no great way to finesse it. If you instead of having a 50% loan to value ratio got 80%, That's 30% difference. That's how your mortgage payment is going to go from 50 bucks to $80. For every 50, you're going to go to 80. That's a 60% increase. If your mortgage payment is 60% higher, I cannot teach you little tricks to get your cash flow positive, okay? 60% is a big freaking number. So now, you want to know what your cash flow really is. I'll tell you what your cash flow is. You get your Schedule E and your Form 4562 for your tax return. The Schedule E has your rent income. I'm good with that. And probably other income, laundry, coin machines and stuff. And it's got your operating expenses. I'm good with that. It also says depreciation. Forget that. Okay. Now we're going over to this other form. It also on Schedule E is interest expenses. I'm not interested in that either. Just rent, operating expenses. Now we go over to Form 4562. On the right-hand side, calculate depreciation on all the things you bought this year or previously that's not fully depreciated. In the left-hand column, you identify the asset, and the next column from the left is your original cost. That number I'm interested in. If it was purchased this year, like a roof or a new building or a refrigerator, I want you to take that original cost, all of it, and put that on your cash flow. That's a deduction. And you may say, well, I put a roof on one of my buildings last year. That's a one-time expense. Folks, if it's a slate roof, it's a one-time expense. I have a slate roof, or a Spanish tile roof, or concrete tile. Generally, it's not a one-time expense. It's a every 20 or 25 years expense. Plus, if you've been in this business long enough, you know that this year is the roof, next year is an air conditioner compressor, next year the asphalt parking lot is really shot and you have to repave it. It's always something. And you never count any of them because it's a one-time roof expense, it's a one-time air conditioner condenser expense, it's a one-time new furnace expense, and 20 years from now, there comes that one-time roof expense again. So you got to stop not counting the capital expenses because it's always something. I mean, if you're small, you might have a year when you don't buy a refrigerator, you don't repave anything, you don't repaint. If you're small, when you get to a certain number of units, it's never going to happen. It's always something. So you got to put those capital expenditures off the second column of 4562. The whole amount you spent this year for the roof or the condenser or whatever it was, that's a deduction from this year's cash flow. The other thing I want you to deduct is your mortgage payment, not the interest, which is what goes on the tax return, the mortgage payment, interest and principal. Now your cash flow is your rent minus your operating expenses minus the capital expenditures you made this year in toto minus your mortgage payment. That is your cash flow. Now, you don't have to reveal that at cocktail parties, but at least reveal it to yourself. In the privacy of your home, when you're thinking what a genius you are, do that number and find out, get an accurate assessment of what how well you're doing. Most of you guys pay too many taxes. My first full-length book in real estate is called Aggressive Tax Avoidance for Real Estate Investors. Jay probably got the first edition, 1983. He's talking to me at supper tonight about that book. He liked that book. Yeah, it's now in its 19th edition. Sometimes people tell me that book saved them 15 grand or something. There's all kind of things in there. I'm not going to go into it. One of them is a home office. If you're a real estate investor, you're entitled to a home office deduction. Take it. And you got all kind of accountants and tax people say, well, it's a red flag, screw that. I've been taking a home office deduction since the beginning of time. It's straightforward. You're authorized to do it. I've been audited once in my life. That was a taxpayer compliance measurement program audit. Does anybody know what that is? That is the audit where they audit every line of your return. You say you were born in 1946? Birth certificate. You say you're married, marriage certificate. You say you have 3 kids, 3 more birth certificates. Every line on a 23-page return. And I got a letter of commendation from the Internal Revenue Service on my website because it was a no-change audit. 23 pages, and they audited every line. Wherever they're and they audited the contents, like if I said plumbing expense for the year on an apartment building, it wanted a receipt for every penny, which I had. After the no change audit was really, I found some stuff in my favor, and the auditor, nice lady, found some stuff in the IRS's favor, and she washed it. Okay? I waited after that until the day before the statute of limitations ran out. And I filed a 1040X on everything that was in my favor. Not only did I get a no change audit, I changed all the stuff that was in my favor. And they could not come back at me because the statute of limitations applies to both sides. So there are, now in there, one of the things in there, I got $8,000 credit for prior AMT, prior year AMT. Anybody know what that means? Not the AMT, the whole deal. The credit for prior year alternative minimum tax. Does anybody know what that means? $8,000 I got. I wrote about it in my newsletter, and I started getting letters from my subscribers saying, hey, I got that too. My IRS auditor said, what's that? And I said, if you ever pay the alternative minimum tax, and then there comes a year subsequent when you don't, you get back the AMT you paid before. And she said, I never heard that. And I said, at one point in the audit, she was looking at my inventory figure. When you sell books or anything for a living, you have a cost of goods sold page, and you have your sales for the year minus what you paid for the products, in my case, books. And the difference is your profit. So she sees this list of inventory, which is part of my cost of goods sold calculation, and each line is an abbreviation. And the first line was ATA. And she said, what is that? And I said, that's a taxable insurance. So she wanted a copy of that book. So I brought that in for her. I had 3 meetings with her. Brought that into the second meeting. At the third meeting, she said, I read your book. And she said, I really learned a lot. It's a great book. Plus, she had checked with her boss about credit for prior year AMT, and he said, correct. You know how I found out about that? I was looking at the list of forms, like in November, to order from the IRS, because you get all the forms free at irs.gov. I was looking at the list of forms, and I come on this one that says credit for prior year AMT. Give me one of those. You turn it over. On the back, there's the instructions and the explanation of what it's about. And I said, I would get $8,000 for that. So I had an accountant buddy that I used to talk to a lot. I called him up. I said, am I missing something here? He said, no, that's right. So I did it. And I got a check. $8,000. And I wrote about it in my newsletter. And my newsletter subscribers, they went to their accountant. And the accountant said, I never heard of that. And they filed 1040X amended return. And they got typically $8,000. So you need to know about that stuff. A lot of you have the attitude, oh, taxes, my accountant takes care of that. No. Number one, you got to know it so you can pick an accountant. Now, I have picked nobody. Not that complicated. Friends of mine who had accountants all their lives, they read my book and they fired their accountant. They're bad at it, and they've been doing it themselves ever since. Yeah, but if you're going to have an accountant, you need to understand the tax law fairly well to be able to tell the good one from the bad one. When Geraldine Ferraro was a vice presidential candidate, her husband was a small-time real estate investor. And the press, oh, we're going to look at that tax return. We're going to find all that sleazy stuff he did. And initially, they didn't want to release it. So finally, they released the tax return, which the husband and wife, and there's all his real estate stuff. So they bring in the white shoe Wall Street, accounting, big 8 accounting firm. And they look at it to find the fault with it. And they said, guy didn't really do a very good job of taking advantage of all the things he could have taken advantage of. So it's the